Hi guys. So Iain Duncan Smith, former leader of the Conservative Party, was invited on talk radio to talk about Brexit and Boris Johnson being in a strong position to get a deal, and a no deal is just as good. Now, why is Iain Duncan Smith invited on TV, or on the radio in this case? I refer to Iain Duncan Smith as the placeholder politician. He doesn't actually represent anything. He's no longer valid in the Conservative Party, but he is used as a tool to present an idea to the public and for the public to respond. He's like a sort of human focus group, or a human slogan. So what they do is they put him out on TV or on the radio with an idea and see how the public respond. If the public respond in a positive way, then they say, okay, let's run with that. If the public respond in a negative way, they say, well, that's just Iain Duncan Smith. He's not a member of the government. So they're able to use him in this way to avoid any type of scrutiny if it's negative. So anyway, he's on talk radio to talk about Brexit. So let's hear what he had to say.
Well, let's talk to our next guest, Iain Duncan Smith. He's former Tory leader, also former Work and Pension Secretary, of course, and a Conservative MP. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Morning. Now, of course, you were a long-standing Brexiteer, long before it became fashionable. We have got, obviously, this statement from the Prime Minister. We've got that interview with Lord Frost yesterday, David Frost, who's been our EU chief negotiator, saying, look, we won't be a client state, we won't blink, and Britain isn't scared of a no deal. Boris Johnson's statement today, 38 days, or we walk away, and no deal will be a good outcome.
So let's just take this. I just need to stop this and clarify something. So Boris Johnson is basically saying a no deal is just as good. So imagine a scenario where you have a car, you crush the car, you ask for it to be taken away and crushed. Then you go to a car dealer and you say, I want to buy a new car. And you try to work out an agreement with the car dealer in order to buy a new car. And you say to the car dealer, give me a car, but if you don't give me a car, it's just as good for me. Now, the car dealer will probably point out the obvious that, well, if you go back home, you don't have a car. And your response is, well, it doesn't make any difference to me. I can get to work on foot. Maybe it takes me like 3 hours, but I can still, I don't need a car. But maybe I prefer to have a car. Or for me, a car or no car doesn't really make a lot of difference. This is basically the Brexiteer position. Or this is what they're trying to present to the European Union. If we get a deal, it's good. If we don't get a deal, it doesn't really make that much difference. We're still going to be a strong nation. That's where we're at the moment.
Is this the usual typical bluffing at the 11th hour, or does he actually mean it?
Well, I think Boris Johnson certainly means it because that's a reality, that if the EU doesn't engage properly and recognise that this is not the same negotiation that they were having with Theresa May's group that seemed to have no understanding of European law at all.
So Boris Johnson's team and Boris Johnson knows more about European law than Theresa May's group. You're going to sit there and say that? Really?
And seem to spend their whole time saying, what would you like to the European Union? So I think...
They didn't say that. Why are you putting words in their mouths? Why are you saying that Theresa May's negotiating team were asking the European, what would you like? They weren't. Why are you saying that? Have you had some sort of amnesia over the last number of years?
There's a slow process of coming to terms with the fact that the UK government is different, that it has the majority to be able to get legislation through.
That's irrelevant. The Tories seem to think, or Brexiteers in general seem to think, well, now that Boris Johnson has his majority, he's able to tell the European what to do, or he's in a stronger position. What's happening in Parliament is irrelevant to the European Union. This was somewhat important back when the UK was a member of the European Union. But now that they've left, the EU are indifferent to whether Boris Johnson has a majority or not. Really, I don't know why they seem to think that this is important.
And that this has already, we've left the EU. I mean, We left back on the 31st of January. So this is an interim period before we finalise a deal. But the reality for the UK is that we are sovereign, and the EU has to deal with a sovereign nation, not a nation.
How offensive that is. So are you saying that Ireland is not sovereign? Are you saying that Germany is not sovereign? Are you saying that France is not sovereign? I'd like to hear Iain Duncan Smith say to their faces, I'd like him to say to the Taoiseach of Ireland, your country is not sovereign. I'd like him to say to Angela Merkel, your country is not sovereign. I'd like him to say to Macron, your country is not sovereign. Why is it we were not sovereign, but now we are? But he'll never say about other countries. I've never heard him say that Ireland is not a sovereign nation.
That's a member anymore of the European Union, and that seems to be a problem for the EU at the moment with their negotiators.
Well, the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said that the EU is operating on double standards, asking the UK to sign up to conditions that it wouldn't expect any other country to sign up to, and indeed would not sign up to itself to get a deal with, say, Canada or Japan when it comes.
Okay, Dominic Raab is not the best when it comes to geography. And you say, they're expecting us to sign up to an agreement that Japan and Canada have. Sorry, they're expecting us to sign up to one that's not the same as Canada or Japan. Now, if you're a Brexiteer and you don't understand the difference between the UK's position and Japan and Canada's position, I'd prefer that you just close the video now and don't watch anymore, because you're beyond help. Sorry if I'm sounding arrogant here. If you don't believe me, take out a map and look at the difference between the UK and Canada and Japan. Now, just from a geographical point of view, there's a huge difference. Now, people say, well, okay, geography is one thing, but we have international trade or whatever. Yes, but the economies of Japan and Canada are completely different to the UK. Completely different economies. That's why the European Union said, look, we're not going to give you the deal that Japan has or that Canada has. The UK have asked for it. How is that's another example of we're in a strong position. We want to copy someone else's deal. Instead of saying we want to have our own deal. Wouldn't that be, demonstrating your sovereignty? Like, how sovereign are you? Of course, this is just a ridiculous argument, but let's follow through Iain Duncan Smith's logic. We're a sovereign nation, so we want to copy someone else's deal. We can't be actually bothered with actually working out the fine detail of having our own deal. Is it because you're lazy? It's like, we don't want to do the homework, so we want to copy someone else's. But the European Union has said on numerous occasions the geographical location of the UK in respect to the European Union and Japan and Canada are completely different.
To getting a free trade deal in terms of giving away our rights on how much state aid we give, and indeed handing over control of our fishing waters to other nation states. Do you think the issue is fundamentally that the EU does not really accept Brexit, doesn't really believe it's actually happened, still think that it's going to sort of be undone somehow, and doesn't really accept that we are a third party to deal with now? Or
she represents this. There are two types of Brexiteers. They're the ones who think the EU don't want us to leave and they just won't accept that we have left. And there are more pragmatic Brexiteers who say, yeah, well, they know we've left, but we're going to get a better deal. She's, of course, from the former, and they're the more insane ones.
Or do you think this is just a negotiating tactic? It worked with Theresa May. They still think it might work with Boris Johnson.
Actually, I think the issue isn't that they don't recognise Brexit. They do. They have to, because we've actually left. I mean, this is the bit that people get wrong. We actually left the EU officially, so we are a sovereign country. So they recognise that. They have to. The problem they've got right now is that I think they fear the outcome of Brexit with their UK, which now starts to make changes and does things in a way that puts some pressure on their own market and their own way that they behave. In fact, if you talk to any of those that they've negotiated with, the EU has always been a pretty aggressive a pretty bullying negotiating partner. I was talking to some Japanese officials not so long ago, and they said they really don't even like the deal that they've got, particularly because they felt they were bullied over the amount of Japanese elements that should be in any single piece of production, which left.
I don't know whether this is true or not, but let's say it's true, for example, that the Japanese are not happy with their deal. If the Japanese are not happy with their deal, whose fault is that? Well, according to Iain Duncan Smith, it's the European Union's fault because they're aggressive, because they're good at negotiating. You know, if the Americans are good at negotiating, Iain Duncan Smith would say, well, that's a positive. You know, they're able to stand up and defend their nation, defend their bloc. If the Japanese are good at negotiating, it's because they're a strong nation. They're able to defend their position. If the European Union is able to defend its position, if it's a strong negotiator, aggressive negotiator, it's negative. So if the Americans do it, it's positive. If the Japanese do it, it's positive. If the UK does it, it's positive. If the European Union does it, it's negative. Why? Something also about Brexiteers like Iain Duncan Smith will be that they'll try to sell you two conflicting ideas. They'll try to tell you that the EU is strong and aggressive, and then in the next phrase they'll say, well, the EU is extremely weak, and it's, we have it where we want it.
The EU in a stronger position, so you have to be pretty tough and pretty strong with them. That's what they do. But the reality for them is that their main concern is their fear that the UK becomes a very competitive nation on their borders. And for example, alignment. They're arguing that we must align with their rules and regulations, which leaves us in their hands. Every time they change their regulations, we would have to change ours, and that's not very sovereign. Fishing, of course, it's a sovereign issue. It's about the fact that we have territorial waters. We're happy to negotiate with them after this about how and how much catch should be taken by different countries. But we're not going to stand by the original agreement because that is dead. And the final bit, of course, is state aids. People say, oh, well, we don't want to have state aids for different companies. The truth is the EU is bound now on a course to include taxation in their state aids rules. And that makes it very difficult for the UK when we wish to alter taxes, change the way that we deal with both individuals and companies, that the EU would have a say in that. And that would be quite wrong as a sovereign nation. So
it's about agreements. You agree things. You agree something with the European Union. I understand that the Brexiteers are trying to sell this idea that, we don't want the European Union controlling our laws or something. But these are not it's not the case of the European Union controlling laws. It's you have an agreement with them. This thing about state aid comes down to trust. The European Union don't trust you to facilitate state aid to private companies in a transparent way. They want to see what you're going to do. And what you're doing instead is saying, no, we don't want to tell you what we're going to do. That's our business. The European Union said, okay, fine. But then we're not going to trust you. We're not going to give you a free trade agreement. We're not going to give you a deal. And then the UK's response is, how dare you do that? It's like they want the EU to trust them, but they don't want to earn that trust. Now, people say, well, the UK doesn't need to earn its trust. Yes, it does. People like Iain Duncan Smith, members of the Conservative Party, the media in the UK, have been talking about we should be tearing up the withdrawal agreement, an international agreement. So to say, on one side, we're willing to destroy international agreements, and then on the other side to say, please trust us, why would the EU trust you?
As Boris Johnson has said, we've asked for a Canada-style deal. The EU has refused to engage on that. But we as a sovereign now, as Canada is compared to the EU, and therefore they need to deal on the reality that's in front of them.
What?
So because Canada is quote-unquote sovereign, and because we are quote-unquote sovereign, that means that we should be able to have a deal like Canada. This really, I think they're just being lazy. To work out a deal takes a lot of time and effort. The Tories are lazy. They should be sanctioned by Universal Credit. That's how lazy they are. They don't want to work. Iain Duncan Smith should be sanctioned, certainly. This is the impression I'm getting. They're too lazy to actually work out a deal, so they just want to copy and paste a deal with someone else, from someone else with that someone else has with the EU. And the EU are saying, no, you can't do that, because, what Canada trade with us is completely different to what you trade with us. Canada is the priority exports, the main exports of Canada are resources, natural resources, while in the UK it's services. Like, it's completely different. That's why you can't have a Canada-style agreement. And that's even if we ignore the geographical differences.
What about the reality of Northern Ireland? We've got the withdrawal agreement signed last year, and this sort of special situation for Northern Ireland made people like the DUP very unhappy, but effectively coming under sort of UK law and EU law in this sort of, I mean, it was always going to have to be a muddle because of the status of Northern Ireland on the Irish Irish nation, on the island of Ireland, I should say. There is a lot of concern now that a bill that's going to be published this week is actually going to change things, and it's going to formalise trading rules with the UK under the Internal Markets Bill, and effectively it's going to undermine that agreement. Are you concerned about that?
No, I'm not, actually, because I think it's quite right for a sovereign country to have put limitations on where its courts can refer to change the rules. So, example.
What? So this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The UK agreed, they signed up to the withdrawal agreement. Okay, an international agreement. It was signed in European parliaments, and it was signed in the UK Parliament. Now, what's very funny about this guy who's on the screen was that when the withdrawal agreement was put into a bill in Parliament, the UK Parliament, there was time for people to read it. There was supposed to be time for people to read it. And this guy voted to fast track the time, to basically to not allow members of Parliament time to read the withdrawal agreement bill. It went through Parliament quickly, and then after he complained, actually there are parts of it that I didn't read. Now, I sometimes think that members of the Conservative Party are some sort of evil geniuses who are playing 4D chess with all of us. But when you fast track something, you create a rule within Parliament to stop people from reading the withdrawal agreement bill, and then later complain that you didn't have time to read it. It's like, you're in the car, you're reading a book, then you throw the book out the window, and then you complain, I didn't have time to finish the book. This is the level of insanity we're at. Now, back to the point of, tearing up the withdrawal agreement. So in the withdrawal agreement, there are rules regarding Northern Ireland. There are stipulations regarding Northern Ireland. And now Iain Duncan Smith says, well, we should ignore those things we've agreed to. So you still want the EU to trust you, and you're saying here on the radio we should ignore international law.
For example, this bill would essentially lock out the Supreme Court and other courts in the UK from referring to European law or to the judgments.
Then why did you sign up to the withdrawal agreement? Why did you vote for the withdrawal agreement? This is insane. He didn't read it, and then he's complaining about it. He didn't read it, he signed it, and then he didn't, and then he's complaining about it. Look, I know, when you sometimes buy a new mobile phone or a new mobile phone contract, we don't read the fine print, we don't read the contract. But you can't go back after and complain, well, look, there was this thing, this line 354 that said that I need to pay, if I don't pay my bill, then after I get penalties. I didn't read that, but I don't want to pay it. Try that in court. Try using that excuse in court. He's happy to say, well, we should be allowed our Supreme Court. He's invoking justice here when he doesn't have one idea of how justice actually works.
to the Court of Justice on a whole range of issues. In other words, they would have to look quite rightly to Parliament for their laws rather than to go to this supranational body. And the second bit about it is people who are saying, oh, this is a shock. I was listening to the BBC the other day, last night actually, talking about this is unexpected. Actually, if they had read the agreement and the bill that we signed as
I honestly, I swear to God, I did not watch this video before. I just saw Iain Duncan Smith and I said, I have to respond to this. I knew what he was going to say. I swear to God, I haven't seen this video before making this response. Iain Duncan Smith voted on a rule in Parliament to stop people from reading the withdrawal agreement. He then complained that he didn't have time to read the withdrawal agreement. And now, in this video, he's complaining that people didn't read the withdrawal agreement.
a result, you'll see that in the bill there is a clause, I think it's clause 38, that says specifically in terms that nothing in the agreement shall alter the UK's right for sovereign status. So in other words, anything that we believe is therefore going to change that is already outlawed within that bill. So
you don't understand what sovereignty means. What he's doing here is he's attaching on his own interpretation to the law. Now, I don't know if Iain Duncan Smith is a lawyer or if he has worked as a judge or something like this. I hope he hasn't. This is just insane. He's trying to reinterpret something in his way and saying, well, this is the way it is. But it doesn't work like that.
This future legislation they're talking about bringing forward this week only gives some strength to that. And can I just answer one point that your previous collaborator, who's going to be discussing things with you later today, said this is a difficult financial time for the UK, so this is all going to be double whammies. Actually, the European Union is in a very serious state economically at the moment as well. So this is not a one-way trip. For the EU, they need to have a deal because they export to the UK far more than the UK exports to them in goods and agri-products. The UK is a big exporter of financial services, and that's the biggest part of our GDP by a very long way. And that.
So you think that, well, the EU need a deal because we sell a lot of things to them. Just think about that for a moment. He's trying to convince you that, yeah, of course, the EU sell a lot of things to the UK, but we also sell a lot of things to them. That's why they need a deal. Iain, I think you've got it a bit backwards. You need a deal, not the EU. But I've said this before. The EU will not give you a deal if it damages the Union. And I'm talking about not the UK Union, I'm talking about the European Union. Politically. They will always put that first. They're willing always to take a hit financially to protect the Union. Brexiteers don't understand this, or they ignore it. They think it's all about money, it's all about trade, it's all about money. It's not. Protecting the Union is paramount. And I've said before, they're willing to take a hit in order to protect the Union. You can see how back in 2016, when the UK said we're leaving the European Union, what was the European Union's first task? It was to prepare for the UK to leave. Now, the UK instead started going around saying, well, they want us to stay and we want to get our deal and we're going to get a great deal and the deal we're going to get is going to be better than membership. And this went on for years and years, back and forth, back and forth. During that time, what did the EU do? It prepared for the UK to leave without a deal. They had the foresight to say, look, the UK is messing around. We're going to prepare for a no deal. We're going to prepare for the UK leaving without a deal. That's why they instructed countries that trade directly with the UK to prepare for that, to have a workaround. Now, they were probably hoping that it wouldn't be necessary, but they were planning ahead. They said, look, be prepared. It's as a type of insurance policy. While in the UK, Boris Johnson and the other idiots in his party were saying, we are in control, we're in control. We don't need to, build border posts. We don't need to invest in leaving the European Union because we're going to get the best deal ever. We're going to get a better deal than membership. And now we're at a stage, a few months before the end of the year, where nothing is prepared, or very little is prepared, and there's a mad scramble in the UK to prepare to leave when there was ample time to prepare to leave before. And they're still thinking that we have the EU where we want them in some way. It's beyond me.
It doesn't carry tariffs.
Back in June 2016, someone has just tweeted me, Boris Johnson said, of course EU countries will continue trading with us on a tariff-free basis. They would be damaging their own commercial interests if they didn't. That's why EU politicians would be banging down the door for a trade deal. On the 24th of June. Well, because they didn't really do that straight away. We went through all the machinations and the pain of the last few years. Are you 100% confident that we will get a deal because it is in the interest of the German car manufacturers and the French agriculture?
They still think this is the driving force of the EU. I really wish I could, and I don't mean this in any malice, I really wish I could speak to Julia or to Iain Duncan Smith directly and say, please, can I just say one thing? The union will always trump trade. That's it. If you understand that much about the European Union, that's all I want you to know. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it a dictatorship. You can call it undemocratic. I don't care. That's, in a way, it's irrelevant. What I'd like you to know is that they care more about protecting the union than they care about making money. If you could understand that I would be satisfied. But they still don't seem to understand that.
Cultural sector, etc., etc., and the Spanish fisheries people, or whatever it is. Are you 100% convinced it's going to happen?
No, I've never been absolutely convinced that common sense prevails, but...
Okay, guys, I have to end it here because this is going to go on for too long. Iain Duncan Smith is saying that common sense will not prevail. Iain Duncan Smith is skeptical of common sense in the European Union. The same Iain Duncan Smith who voted to fast track an agreement that he hadn't read. And then complained that he didn't have time to read it. And then now has complained about people not reading it. I give up. These people are beyond help. They have no understanding of what the European Union represents. They have no understanding of the UK's position in the world. They think that the UK and Canada are the same. The UK and Japan are the same. They don't understand that you can't just copy and paste agreements, that there are things to be worked out. They are beyond help. I don't know what else to say. And it is indicative that Iain Duncan Smith is being brought on these shows to put out feelers about what we can do, what we shouldn't do. How will the public respond to this? It seems that the Brexit policy making has always been driven from the bottom and not from the top. It says, okay, what will the voters let us get away with? It seems to be the case. While at the same time saying, okay, well, we need to leave because we need to protect certain industries who don't want to pay taxes or who don't want to be scrutinized or who don't want to defend their workers or defend European standards on the environment or animal welfare. This is what the Brexit, the ones who pay in, who invest with their cash want. So the Conservatives are somewhat fought between those people and the ones who are, let's leave without a deal, the European Union is a dictatorship, is undemocratic, whatever. And they're walking a tightrope. And what they do is they send out Iain Duncan Smith on the tightrope to see if he falls off. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?